Thank you very much for the invitation to speak and for the fantastic background. Um, the date on that is not a mistake. It's not a typo. Um, this presentation includes some of the slides that I picked out on from a series of from a discussion I had with my group on that day, 28th of April 2018, where we all had dinner at my house, and I sort of started the brainstorming process of talking to them about what I'd been thinking about. So I haven't, I'm not showing all of the slides, but I've just taken them from that evening. The context here is that by the time I was appointed in 2012 as a university lecturer, running my lab for the first time and also doing transplantation. By the time I'd got to this point, 5 or 6 years later, what it was very clear to me that I had made a lot of mistakes, far too many to really account for all of them. And I also, hopefully, had learned a lot. I still make a lot of mistakes. Some of my groups are here today. They'll tell you that I still make those mistakes. But I became conscious of some of the things that I had done actually weren't the best way of doing things. And I'd also been doing a lot of reading about what successful organizations look like. I became particularly interested in how successful companies are run and how great companies endure time, and they incentivize and motivate their people to work with. In fact, I almost left medicine as a final year medical student when I started my first company. So I started thinking about actually what are the principles that one could apply or I could apply to my group. There was one key thing that came out in all of the reading that I had done, was that the most important thing in any organization is fairness. If people, even in a single individual in an organization, deems that they are treated unfairly, that's the beginning of toxicity. So I've been thinking about, okay, what does fair look like in an academic scenario, right, or in an academic organization? The understanding is, well, people are chosen. It was their choice to be here. It's their choice not to get paid a lot of money. It's their choice to work 20 hours a day. It's their choice not to have any perks, right? They've chosen to do this, so it's fair, and it's in their contract. But what we have to remember is that actually the people who are here, particularly in this university, are almost certainly the very best of their friends when they were at school. And those people look at how these friends are doing elsewhere, right? And what quality of life they have and what accomplishments they have. So we was starting to think about, actually, are there any lessons that we can learn from looking at other great organizations? So I'd been doing a lot of thinking, having discussions with lots of different people that I trusted, people I thought who were my mentors and close friends, before I kind of came up with this sort of idea that we discussed at my house over dinner. I can tell you that everybody, without exception, told me don't do it. Without exception, including, and you will see why, but I had also discussions with some of the university administrators, including Cambridge Enterprise. They said, don't do it, this will go wrong. I am pleased to say that it hasn't gone wrong. In fact, the sort of concerns that they had about what we were about to do didn't materialize. So the issue with historical academia, and I'm not speaking about this university, and I'm not speaking about any particular laboratory or a particular group, but this is what academia looks like, right? You've got a PI who sits at the top, and essentially it's a funnel whereby pretty much all of the output of that group, that organization, feed into primarily for the benefit of that group leader, right? And we accept this. Well, being given opportunities, and they're being trained, and they're getting their papers out, and they can go and get their jobs. So it is accepted that actually the PI should be the principal, if not the only beneficiary of that. The problem with that is that it is not a sustainable model. I mean, you would never organize a successful institution like this, because the problem with that is if that's your model, then basically there's the only way for people to benefit is to exit that organization. There are lots of examples of groups that have completely ceased to exist when the PI is left in this university and elsewhere. The reason is because actually the sort of the one person that is absolutely and exclusively critical to the group is that PI, right? You wouldn't set up a company like that. I mean, you wouldn't have a situation whereby actually the entire existence of that organization ceases when that PI leaves. So, okay, that's the current scenario at the moment, and there are things that we accept in academia because that's just how they're done, and everybody's chosen to be here, right? So this is an example from somewhere else whereby, in this particular institution, well, if you subscribe to the coffee club and you pay £2 a month, then you can have coffee. But if you don't pay your £2 a month, you can't have the coffee. Now, at the same time, we ask those people in those institutions to come in at 3 o'clock in the morning at 5 minutes notice to do a lot of work, coming out weekends and all that, and go far beyond what they really should be doing. But don't they dare have a cup of coffee when they're here. This is an example. It may seem trivial, but this is what unfairness looks to me, right? Now, when you look at other organizations, well, actually, it's very different. Organizations that are good places to work are whereby the individuals and the members of those teams are appreciated, and they are given opportunities or benefits that are beyond what their contractual entitlements are. It almost doesn't matter what these things are. Right? The point is saying that actually we're going to give you this tiny little thing. It's not in your contract, but we give it to you because we are grateful for what you do. And I think these signals actually make really a big difference. What is more is that when you look at the really successful organizations, actually the members of those organizations are owners of that organization, right? So actually, if the organization does well, everybody benefits, and everybody feels that they are they're contributing to a greater goal that actually will benefit them if the organization is successful. This is pretty key in preventing what sadly is seen in academia is unhealthy competition between members of the same group, right? Because now you're kind of jostling for position for whether it's the attention of the PI or some seniority. But actually, if you were all true owners of the organization and the organization's output, then actually you would be great if somebody else did well, because then that means the whole organization does well. So we started thinking about, okay, what would that look like in academia? So why bother with all of this is truly because, and I think this is not particularly controversial, is that actually if people are happy, they do better. Not just for themselves, but they do better for their organizations. And actually happiness is pretty critical. If I were to use two words, are unfair versus happy, right? If we start moving the organization away from unfairness towards happiness, then that's when we start to make an impact. But the idea was also then to start thinking about, actually, should it be that all of the ownerships, all of the accolades, all of the benefits are going through the PI? There's one other fundamental, I think, issue with how many, not all, but many academic groups are constructed, is that the PI at the top is usually the oracle. Right, it's the PI who knows the most and typically makes the final decision. Not always, but often. Now, in some groups, particularly like my group, where we have a diverse research profile, actually that's not possible. What is more is that when you think about any other organization, If it is the CEO or the top person or the manager who knows everything better than everybody else, that's a failed organization, right? Because you haven't recruited people who are better than you. So we started thinking about, actually, that's not the job of the PI, is to be the fountain of knowledge at everything, but actually is to coordinate and bring people who then become experts in their own areas, and they tell the group what the group should be doing. Okay, so we wanted to just do some experiments, and I guess we've been doing this experiment for about well, over 6 or 7 years, and you'll hear about some of the results, good and bad, later on. So what we wanted to do is to sort of think about, okay, what would the organization, what would the group look like? How could we establish a better structure for us to work together as a group, both in terms of the science we do, in terms of how we work together, actually how we manage our finances, but also create some resources and create impact above and beyond what people were contractually entitled to. So this is the kind of model that we were or still trying to get. I can tell you that some of the members of my group are sitting here. I'm proud to say that actually they are the experts in many of the things that we do in our group, not me. And I ask them the questions of what should we be doing. And actually they are the leaders in that space. To me, that's success rather than failure. So anyway, so that's the model that we wanted to get to. At that time, there was sort of, those were the research themes in my group, and you know what, we started thinking about, actually who would be the leader in those areas, and who would be working those, who would have the sort of the leadership role in those areas. But of course, then there needs to be coordination. It's not about devolving responsibility to others, but it's about thinking how we empower other people to participate. So then we thought about, okay, what if, how do we think about actually allowing people in the group to benefit from things a little bit more than what they're entitled to? Okay, and we thought, well, why would that be useful? Okay, why is that a good signal to give, even if it seems trivial? Because we thought that actually it would lead to movement from unfairness towards happiness, and actually people could use those for whatever they wanted to do. So lots of discussions were had over the ensuing few weeks and months, and we do have now, Krish will speak about it, we have a happiness club, whereby, and these were some of the things that were in it, that it changes from time to time, where actually we provide as a group resources for the rest of the group to use. And I'll come to the funding of these. These are the sort of things that we've tried. Basically, what I pledged to do at that time was to provide some money on an annual basis, whereby we can, the group can use how much, what that money is used for. The amounts are important, but actually it's substantial, and I will say that actually it never gets used up every year, because people are actually very, very mindful. So, for example, the sort of things that we've had is, right now there is a taxi account. So let me give you another example of what I consider to be unfair, and this is no reflection on any academic institution, say not this one. So my group, because we work with human tissue a lot, they oftentimes come in at very short notice, sometimes with half an hour short notice, often are working at night, often at weekends, often very long hours, because there's a donor and they may be in hospital. So at the moment, actually, if they've been in for a long time, and it's 3 o'clock in the morning and it's rainy outside and their bike is punctured, actually, if they decide that they get a taxi, because that's commutes to work, actually, they're not allowed to be to claim for that, right? So to me, that seems unfair. So we have a taxi. I have a taxi account. They just call a Panther. They give a code. They go home, and I'll pay for it. On an annual basis. The purpose with these things is that they don't have to spend and claim for it. There are resources in here that they can use. So we've had Costa and M&S vouchers. This was in those early days. We've tried things like paying for bike maintenance when we used to have the bike man, where they can just take their bike for the bike to be used. These are trivial, but these are the sort of things that the team came to. But the idea was that they didn't have to ask for permission; they could use it. We just remembered a couple of weeks ago that actually I even put a cash guard in the locker with money on it and said, look, if you are actually suddenly lost your wallet and you need money, that there's a cash guard. We don't know where the cash guard is, so we need to. But I can tell you that nobody ever used the cash guard. And this is so when I was telling some friends and mentors, they said, don't do this because everybody will use this within a week and it'll all be gone. I made a bet. I said, I bet you that actually nobody will use it because the group are so thoughtful that actually they want to preserve these for others to use. So actually we did end up having to go back to, please use this stuff. This is for your benefit. In terms of the funding, so the idea was there's no personal contribution that I would contribute to this, and I've done that. The pledge that I made, I don't think we've ever ended up using all of that money every year. So the idea was to have donations. But we thought about actually how do we make this sustainable, right? So a PI putting contribution is one thing, but how does this become sustainable? So what are the sources of revenue that a group can generate other than grants? So sources of revenue that are unrestricted, right? So the one thing that came up is intellectual property, right? So the university has and we've talked and discussed about it, what happens when people if they do consultancy work and they bring in money and they could do it. But I want to dig into the IP a little bit because that's what we settled on. The university actually has a mechanism that when a PI or any inventors, when the intellectual property from that invention gets commercialized, actually the inventors will receive a portion of that commercial return in due course. And there's a particular formula for it. So what I placed at that time is that and this only applies to me and nobody else in the group, but of all of the intellectual property that I have ever been an inventor on as part of that group, if there is ever any financial return, that I would share all of that financial return with everybody who has ever been in the group up to that point. Now, I can tell you that it hasn't happened yet. So although, I'm named on various patents, nothing has happened yet, but actually they are going through commercial companies. But the principle was and is important. And we also wanted to have this discussion before there was any money, right? Because it's a lot easier. So we spent, you can imagine, a long time thinking about actually what does the formula look like for actually apportioning this, whether it's £2.50 or whether it's £25,000 or 250,000. So we've got a model that works. But the model that we decide to use it's the equivalent of actually having shares in the organization if you are a member of that, right? So we've got a formula that basically anybody who ever has been in the group actually basically gets shares in the group. And there's a number of factors that influence that. But hierarchy isn't one of them. So I don't get more shares just because I'm the PI. But it's things like how long have you been in the group? Have you been on papers, etc., etc. And the idea here is there's one other key important. People might say, well, if the IP is from this bit of work, why give it to everybody else? The fundamental thing here is that usually the IP is for this bit of work. I got the grant for this bit of work because this other people 5 years ago did that other great work, which published the paper, which enhanced my ratings or made me more competitive. So we stand on the shoulder of giants. So the idea was that actually we would do this with everyone. So we have this plan of sharing this revenue if it ever arises. We also spend a lot of time talking about risk benefits. So we set out everybody to go away and discuss with the people who they knew and loved and trusted of why we shouldn't do this and what were the risks. And there were some risks. We talked about legal risk, etc. So and that's kind of how the journey started about 7-8 years ago. Kourosh is going to tell you about some of the consequences of all of that. We're still learning a lot. I'm still making a lot of mistakes. But I would like to think that we have a happy group and people feel valued. And we'll hear whether that's the case or not. Thank you.